Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart.
Officer, our approach to reform focuses on primary and community care, aiming to shift the balance of care where appropriate for people and their families. Our immediate focus on enhancing capacity in the community, and work is underway to increase hospital-at-home provision to 2,000 beds by December 2026, meaning people can receive
government. It's available just a few miles away in the city. So the Shire is left with stacked ambulances, two-tier healthcare, GP practices shutting down and village hospitals shutting. Cabinet Secretary, is there anywhere else in Scotland which won't be running hospital at home? And will he now provide resources to the Shire for it to proceed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I'm very grateful to Liam Kerr for his questions. As he'll know, decisions on how to deliver services for local communities are ultimately for integration authorities to make. In this case, Aberdeenshire Integration Joint Board. But following their escalation, officials have been working with NHS Grampian to confirm the additional funding based on the development of their whole system plan, taking into account the recommendations that have been made within the KPMG report. And through the Assurance Board process, extensive work is underway with NHS Grampian to develop a robust whole system work so that their share of the £85 million of unscheduled care funding can be allocated, and I would expect hospital at home to be part of that consideration.
Brief supplementary, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I very much welcome the investment the Scottish Government is making in the Hospital at Home initiative to be the biggest hospital in Scotland with 2,000 beds by the end of next year. Hospital at Home is allowing my elderly patients and my constituents to benefit from being around their home comforts with family and friends nearby, and I very much welcome that. But beyond this, can the Cabinet Secretary outline what more is being done to support elderly and vulnerable patients to be treated more effectively in hospitals? For example, how will the new frailty units work?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. David Torrance is absolutely right that hospital at home can be transformational in terms of the delivery of services, and the fact that we're moving to 2,000 beds by the end of next year will make hospital at home the largest hospital within Scotland. For people living with frailty, hospitals can increase the risk of harm if their needs are not identified quickly and if our systems and services are poorly coordinated, and that's why we've committed to delivering direct access to specialist frailty teams across every emergency department in Scotland. This will mean that frail patients with complex needs will bypass our busy A&Es to receive the specialist care and support that they need, minimising the risk of prolonged hospital stay. And by providing coordinated multi-agency care both at the front door of our EDs and in the community, we can provide the right care in the right place, helping people experiencing frailty to remain as independent as possible.
Question number 2, Jackie Baillie.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason it is reportedly downgrading fire station services across the country, including in Helensburgh.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Presiding Officer, I think it's very important to be clear. The Scottish Government is not downgrading fire station services across Scotland. Decisions on the location of fire stations, along with vehicles, equipment and the people needed to deal with responding to emergencies, is a matter for the Scottish Fire Rescue Service Chief Officer. The emergencies Scottish Fire Rescue Service responds to have changed significantly over the years. For example, dwelling fires have reduced by 20% since 2013, and at the same time, we do see the risks of flooding and wildfires increasing. It is therefore sensible for the Scottish Fire Rescue Service to carry out a service delivery review to ensure its resources are in the right place at the right time, and the Scottish Fire Rescue Service is currently consulting on its review with a closing date of the 16th of September, and until then, the results of the consultation have been properly analysed. No decisions have been taken.
Jackie Baillie.
Can I thank the Minister for her response, but I have to say it's the Scottish Government that have cut the fire service budget by millions of pounds. So ultimately it is your responsibility. Now, the proposal to downgrade Helensburgh Fire Station is quite simply reckless. The station already has a problem with recruiting sufficient retained firefighters to cover the existing appliances, never mind the additional overnight cover under these proposals. In the previous year, the availability of appliances was only at 50% at night and a staggeringly low 20% at the weekend. That lack of coverage makes the downgrading short-sighted. Will the Minister agree with me and her SNP colleague Brendan O'Hara that this proposal is reckless and should be scrapped?
Minister.
Thank you. Firstly, I think I need to highlight since 2017 to 18 there has been substantial year-on-year increases of funding to support the Scottish Fire Rescue Service, and the current annual budget is over £97 million more than it was in 2017 to 2018. This year alone has an additional £18.8 million in support for frontline services. Now, we understand this is not, as the Scottish Fire Rescue is undertaking a service delivery review, and there is a live public full consultation, and I encourage everybody to take part in that consultation.
Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have been contacted by constituents who have expressed concerns over the change at working patterns at Helensburgh Fire Station and as well as Mulgai Fire Station. Last month, I met with representatives from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service covering West of Scotland, where I expressed the concerns of local residents. The representatives I spoke to admitted that response times could increase as on-call firefighters would have to travel from their homes to the station and then to the destination. Therefore, does the Minister agree that this model risks putting lives in danger?
Minister.
Thank you. And no, I do not agree with the member's assumption. As I said, this is an operational issue for Scottish Fire Rescue Service. No decisions have currently been made, and I would encourage the member and her constituents to take part in the consultation.
Question number 3, Martin Whitfield.
Officer, to ask the Scottish Government how it will deliver on its commitments in the promise in light of the publication Education Outcomes for Looked After Children 2023-24, showing a decline in most key educational outcomes.
Minister Natalie Donennis.
I appreciate Mr Whitfield's concerns. However, I do think it's important not to lose sight of the positive difference in educational outcomes over the long term, where we see the gap in the proportion of children achieving 1 SCQF level 5 or better has reduced by over 20 percentage points between 2009-10 and 23-24. Now, we've introduced a range of targeted support measures such as the Care Experience Student Bursary, the Skills Development Scotland Mentoring Scheme, and providing over £70 million to local authorities through the Scottish Attainment Challenge to support care experienced children and young people's attainment and wellbeing. However, I appreciate the measurements in 23-24 where progress was static or showing small declines require increased focus, and it's important for us to understand how our investment could be more impactful.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm grateful to the Minister for that response. Schools in Scotland must be ambitious for care experienced children and ensure they have all they need to thrive. The independent care review contained in the promise, and yet the results show the percentage leaving school early is rising. 10-point gap in positive destinations. These statistics are a damning picture of the SNP's government's failure to keep the promise. And what's more concerning from the Minister's answer, the government don't appear to understand why. Is that the case?
Minister.
I don't agree with all of that, no. I think these statistics show that we do need to go further to continue those positive trends that I've referred to that are in the long term. In relation to these statistics, I think it's good to see an increase in the proportion of looked-after leavers going on to positive destinations 9 months after leaving school, and that means that we now have more children and young people from the most challenging circumstances getting the chance to succeed at school and in life. Now, we and key partner agencies, like local authorities, need to accelerate our efforts to keep the promise. And earlier this week, the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Education met with local authority directors of education to reflect upon the progress of 10 years of the Scottish Attainment Challenge, but also to look ahead at what more we need to do to give more children a chance to get the skills and the qualifications they need to succeed in life.
Willie Rennie.
The Minister will know about reports of 15-minute timetables for care experienced children. That means they attend school for just 15 minutes in a day without any other support when they leave the school grounds. Now, that, in my view, is exclusion by another name, and it should be stopped, as was stated in the promise. So what investigation has the Minister done into the 15-minute timetables?
Minister.
I think Mr Rennie refers to exclusion, and I've spoken about this previously in the Chamber and at committee. Our national policy on exclusion has a strong focus on approaches that can be used to prevent the need for exclusion. Exclusion should be the last resort, and of course, when used, should be a proportionate response where there is no appropriate alternative. Now, Mr Rennie also refers to 15-minute timetables. Now, I'm not going to go into specific cases, but there can be a number of reasons why children or the school setting may not be the appropriate place for a child at a certain point in that child's life. I think there are a number of measures that the Scottish Government are taking. Some of those I've already alluded to, also around the virtual school network, which is looking at a child's specific needs and how to build an education around that, and also in transitioning them back into a school setting. So there are a number of measures that the Scottish Government are taking to tackle this and ensure that care experienced children and young people get the education that they need.
Question number 4, Davy Russell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's to ask the Scottish Government regarding its definition of what constitutes substantial damp and mould in a home, and at what threshold such conditions are considered necessary to require remedial action by social landlords.
Cabinet Secretary Barry McCallum.
Presiding Officer, all homes in Scotland are required by law to meet the minimum tolerable standard, which requires housing to be substantially free from rising or penetrating damp. The Scottish Government developed guidance for local authorities on the tolerable standard, which includes guidance on assessing damp. Every case is different, and assessors are expected to use this guidance, as well as their professional judgment, to assess whether a house is substantially free from damp on a case-by-case basis. Damp and mould is an issue I take extremely seriously, which is why I committed to bring AWAB's law in across social and private rented sectors from March 26.
Davy Russell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Scottish Home Condition Survey, in its most recently published data, finds that 10%, that is 250,000 of the homes in Scotland, have damp and mould. For 2 decades, this has been an issue that has been actively monitored. As woeful as that is, it is not spread evenly across the population. For low-income families living in rented accommodation, they are all too often left at the whim of rogue landlords and big insurance companies who all too often don't put the householder first. They take the tact of ignore, delay, and then hopefully the householder will either give up or go away, putting numerous hurdles in front of them. The risk to human life associated with having damp and mould conditions present in the family home is far too great to leave the family protection to woolly legislation. Does the Cabinet Secretary seriously believe it goes far enough?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, to frame Davy Russell's question another way, you could say that the Scottish House Condition Survey in 2023 showed that 90% of homes in Scotland were free from damp, condensation and mould. But do I think that goes far enough? No. That's why this week we have confirmed that we will implement AWAB's law, starting with damp and mould across both the private and social rented sectors from spring next year.
Thank you. Question number 5, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports the food sector to export to international markets.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Clearly, food exports are vital to our national and rural economies, and in 2024, food exports were worth £2.1 billion. Now, we have announced an increase in the export support we provide to Scottish companies through the 6-point export plan, which builds on the significant support we already provide to Scottish exporters, such as the £705,000 we provided this financial year towards the Scotland Food and Drink Export Plan, helping to exploit the most significant opportunities there are for Scotland. The UK Government must secure an EU SPS agreement to remove the complex and costly barriers to trade and with our largest single export market, something we have consistently called for.
Karen Adam.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Scotland's mackerel industry is a global success story, now accounting for a fifth of the Japanese market. But processors tell me they are worried about a possible significant quota cut in 2026, which might put their growth at risk. How will the Scottish Government work to ensure processors have access to product so Scotland can continue building on its export success? And would the Minister meet with me and industry representatives to discuss this challenge?
Minister. Karen Adam mentioned the success of the mackerel sector. It is a global success, but there will be scientific advice will be published at the end of this month. We have secured bilateral arrangements with Norway and the Faroe Islands, increasing the UK's quota by over 26,000 tonnes in 2025, the vast majority of which comes to Scotland. Following the introduction of amended economic link licence conditions, we estimate that an additional £52 million worth of mackerel was landed into Scotland in 2023 and 2024. We met with the Scottish Pelagic Processors Association on the 22nd of July in Peterhead, and I'm very happy to consider another meeting to discuss further.
Thank you. Question number 6, Stephen Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with local authorities regarding solutions to the housing emergency.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Since declaring the housing emergency, we have taken an activist and interventionist approach, working extensively with local authorities, particularly those experiencing the most acute housing pressures. Over the summer, I met extensively with partners across the housing sector, including local authorities and COSLA, understanding their challenges, hearing their proposed solutions, and much of that fed into the Housing Emergency Action Plan, which I presented to Parliament this week.
Stephen Kerr.
Scotland's biggest city is enveloped in a homelessness crisis which is impacting all of central Scotland. 44% of people presenting as homeless in Glasgow come from asylum seeker households, and asylum seeker families also make up more than half of all temporary accommodation placements and over 60% of children in such housing. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the SNP policy of open borders would only make the housing emergency worse?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Stephen Kerr, not for the first time in this chamber, should be utterly ashamed of the contributions that he's making. Along with the contributions from his colleague Craig Hoy on a change of character in the south of Scotland, he too should be ashamed. Scotland is an open, welcoming, inclusive country, and the homelessness prevention support that we provide is for everybody in this country.
Question number 7, Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I apologise for being slightly late for this session at the beginning. To ask the Scottish Government regarding the future award of any grants or loans to arts or public performance venues, whether it or any public authority, including Creative Scotland, will require applicants to observe and respect freedom of expression under the law in order to be eligible for financial support, and that failing to do so will require any such funding provided to be repaid.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Freedom of expression is vital to the culture sector, in which the exploration of new ideas and debate are key to innovation. It's for individual artists and cultural organisations to engage with others in debate and discussion as they see fit, and therefore Creative Scotland does not include conditions relating to freedom of expression within its funding terms and conditions. Clearly, though, all organisations, whether publicly funded or not, must operate within the wider framework of the law.
Fergus Ewing.
I commend the Cabinet Secretary for his masterful ambiguity, but an arts venue in Edinburgh was awarded £608,000 of taxpayers' money. And then it went on, Presiding Officer, to ban, to censor and to cancel our very own Deputy First Minister, asserting that she was somehow a threat to the safety and well-being of their staff. Now, will the Scottish Government unequivocally condemn this ludicrous decision, but even more important, prevent it from ever happening again by making it clear that any grant of taxpayers' cash will be clawed back from offenders? Otherwise, the Government is sending out a message that Scotland is where censorship rules okay.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, I think the record has been put very straight on the issue that Mr. Mr. Ewing directly asked of me, but I'm sure he would acknowledge that there have been long-standing examples in relation to freedom of expression in our national and cultural life and issues of controversy. This is not new. I am a strong supporter of the freedom of expression, but also in recognising the arm's-length relationship between Creative Scotland and ministers for very, very good reasons. He will be aware that there is currently a review ongoing into Creative Scotland, and I'll look very closely to any recommendations that they have in relation to Mr Ewing's question. Indeed, he will no doubt have made a submission to that review. I'll be happy to see if he wishes to forward it to me.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. At question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, President Officer. More than 4 out of 5 businesses in Scotland fear they might go bust within 12 months. Around 1 in 6 people in Scotland are trapped on NHS waiting lists, with tens of thousands forced to pay for private treatment. Drugs deaths are still the worst in Europe, with 4,570 lives lost since the SNP declared a national mission. All those issues need the government's urgent attention now. So why on earth did John Swinney give a speech today all about independence?
First Minister.
Well, let me reassure Russell Finlay that all these issues command my attention, and they are the constant focus of the work of my ministers, my cabinet and my own personal attention as First Minister, because, as I said this morning, I am absolutely determined to focus on the priorities of the people of Scotland. And one of the things the people of Scotland are concerned about is their standard of living has been static for most of the last 10 years of austerity bequeathed to us by the Conservative government. And what independence offers for Scotland is a fresh start.
Thank you.
What independence offers for Scotland is a fresh start, and that will be positively welcomed by the people of Scotland.
Russell Finlay.
The title of John Swinney's speech today was "Respecting Scotland's Right to Decide." That's right. This from the party that has never, not for a single minute, respected the decision that Scotland made. He actually said today, and let me quote you because it is absolutely priceless, "You can't just support democracy when it suits you." Well, First Minister, the fringe is over. Enough with the terrible jokes. Scotland did decide. 2 million people voted to reject division.
Correct.
And they're still demanding the SNP give it a rest and focus on what matters. So when will he ever learn to take no for an answer?
First Minister.
President Officer, one of the points I made this morning is that since the 2014 referendum, and by 2030, 1 million individuals will not have had the opportunity in Scotland to decide on our constitutional future. 1 in 4 of the population will not have had that opportunity to decide how this country should be governed. Now, I think when we have a situation with very substantial support in the opinion polls for Scottish independence, with a clearly expressed desire of people to decide on their constitutional future, there should be no roadblocks in the way of the people of Scotland exercising their democratic right to decide on their future. That, after all, is democracy, and I am proud to champion it.
Russell Finlay.
In John Swinney's grand declaration of Leith today, he referenced Scotland's claim of right, and film buffs will know that this nationalist battle cry comes exactly 30 years since the release of Braveheart. He's done everything but paint his face blue, while Scots are blue in the face, saying to the SNP, enough is enough. And I really hate to break it to the First Minister, but John Swinney really isn't
Let's
William
hear one
Wallace, and nor indeed is he even Mel Gibson. We know his game. He knows exactly what he's up to. He's desperately trying to get the focus off the SNP's dismal record of failure on the economy, schools, ferries, drugs, crime, health, everything else. So this week, he cynically focuses on independence and international affairs. Isn't it time he get back to the day job?
First Minister.
Well, I was here on Tuesday leading a debate on the government's priorities for Scotland, and in that debate I set out...
Let's hear one another.
In that debate, I set out the fact that we are now seeing inpatient waiting lists falling in Scotland. We're seeing number of GPs increasing in Scotland. We're seeing the number of drug deaths, although far too high, falling in Scotland. We're seeing young people in Scotland. We're seeing young people in Scotland delivering the best examination results since 2019 before the pandemic. I noticed there wasn't a round of applause for the Conservatives for the young people of Scotland delivering an outstanding examination performance. Well, I'm very proud of them and all that they've achieved. So, I think what the Scottish Government is doing...
Let's hear one another. Let's hear one another.
What the Scottish Government is doing is delivering on the priorities of the people of Scotland. That's what my government is focused on. And what I want to make sure is that Scotland is not inhibited by the failures of Westminster, and that we have the ability to choose the democratic future of independence. And I'm confident the people of Scotland will make that choice.
Russell Finlay.
Well, Scotland is inhibited by the failures of this rotten government. When John Swinney became First Minister, quite understandably he tried to present himself as a more decent front, distancing himself from the chaos of Humza Yousaf. But the mask has now well and truly slipped. Despite what he said today, he's not focused on the economy or education or anything else that truly matters to the people of Scotland who pay our wages. Not doing anything to help improve people's lives. The same old John Swinney is back, obsessed with independence, distracted from the day job. Does he not realise that the majority of Scots want to tell him to move on, John?
First Minister.
Russell Finlay seemed to miss the fact that on Monday the government delivered the abolition of peak rail fares in Scotland, which will help. Well, let me just. Well, while all the shouting is going on, I'll just set out to Parliament.
First Minister. Yep. Sorry, many members wish to put questions today, so let's continue with our business and let's hear one another. First Minister.
So on Monday, when the government delivered on its commitment to abolish peak rail fares, for a commuter travelling from Glasgow to Edinburgh on a daily basis, their travel costs were reduced by 48%. That is an astonishing saving for households in the country, people commuting, and that can't even be welcomed by Russell Finlay today. Now, I don't really think that Russell Finlay is in the strongest position to lecture me today. He just needs to... He just needs to look at the words of his former colleague Jeremy Balfour about how moderate Conservatives feel about the outrageous leadership that Russell Finlay is delivering. What we are seeing in Scotland is Russell Finlay in a partnership with Nigel Farage, and Scotland is going to send both of them packing.
We move to question number 2. I call Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This summer I travelled to every part of our country, and in every community the people I met had one clear priority: fixing our NHS. But this morning John Swinney showed fixing the NHS will never be his priority. Instead, he's trying to use independence to hide from his failures and desperately try to cling on to power, and it's not going to work. Over this summer, we have seen NHS waiting lists soar to include almost 900,000 Scots. Over 100,000 Scots now waiting over a year to be seen on the NHS, and record levels of people paying for their own procedures due to this government's failures, and Scotland still having the highest rate of drug deaths in Europe. Don't Scots deserve a First Minister whose #1 priority will be fixing our NHS?
First Minister.
Well, they've got that, and they don't need to change the First Minister for as long as I'm here. So, let me just give Anna Sauer some of the statistics of what's going on. 97% of people leave Scottish hospitals without being delayed in their discharge from hospital. The number of operations performed in July was the highest in 5 years, an 8.9% increase compared to July last year. Our rapid cancer diagnostic services have reduced the time from referral to diagnosis for patients to an average wait of 14 days, and the number of hip and knee operations reached an all-time high in 2024. That's because the Health Secretary and I are absolutely focused on improving the performance of the National Health Service, and it's delivering for the people of Scotland.
Anna Sarwar.
It's okay, First Minister. I know you're tired, but you've only got 8 months left, so I wouldn't worry about it, because John Swinney...
Through the chair, always, Mr Sarwar.
John Swinney isn't the only knackered SNP politician that's given up on fixing our NHS. Yesterday, Health Secretary Neil Gray abruptly abandoned the SNP's flagship promise to end waits for over a year in our NHS. And on the same day, the news broke that over 1,000 Scots had lost their lives to drugs. What did Neil Gray do? He took to social media to ask people if they had seen the good news about Scotland's NHS on the same day as over 1,000 deaths to drugs was revealed. Record waiting lists with no plan to fix them, record number of Scots forced to pay for their health care, the highest drug death rates in Europe, so out of touch. So is it any wonder that the Patient Safety Commissioner has said that we have a bed crisis and that waiting lists are imploding under the SNP?
First Minister.
Well, inpatient waiting lists are falling. That's what's happening under the SNP. So inpatient waiting lists are getting smaller as a consequence of the interventions we made. I put forward to Parliament a range of measures which would expand the number of procedures and appointments that were envisaged in the National Health Service. We surpassed our original targets with that investment. And of course, we put in place the largest financial settlement to expand the capacity of the National Health Service. Now, what is that achieving for us? Well, that's helping us to roll out the National Treatment Centre activity around the country. It's helping us to deliver an increased number of operations. It's helping us to make sure we've got the largest number of hip and knee operations at an all-time high. So that's all the things that the budget deal put in place. The only problem with the budget deal is that Anna Sauer refused to vote for it. How's he got any credibility on the health service when he can't even put his finger on a button to support the government's budget? It's laughable.
Anna Sarwar.
Officer, what the First Minister is saying is that Patient Safety Commissioner is wrong, and it just proves that he's completely and utterly out of touch. And it's clear that John Swinney and his knackered government are totally out of touch with the reality facing Scots. Peter Black, the only person making a fool of themselves here is this government. I would hate to say it to the Finance Secretary. Peter Black, a grandfather from Lanarkshire with stage 4 cancer, was forced to wait 15 hours through the night to be seen at A&E at Wishaw General. Peter was only seen after a relative contacted the Chief Executive of the Health Board to complain. But why should it take that? Does every family have to complain to the Chief Executive? And Peter's daughter Nicola told me, no family should have to experience what we have, but I know that is a reality for thousands of people. The system is broken, and it feels like the SNP has totally abandoned the NHS. Isn't it the case that our NHS won't survive a third decade of this tired, knackered, out of touch and incompetent SNP government?
First Minister.
In relation to the individual case that Anna Sauer puts to me, I apologise for people that have to wait too long for treatment. So it's unacceptable the length of time that Mr Sauer puts to me for that case. And if he wants to send me the details, I'll look at it very specifically and get an answer from the Chief Executive of NHS Lanarkshire. But what I would say is that in a wider context, the performance of Scotland's core E&E system has outperformed those in England and Wales for the last 10 years. Now, I accept that that is no consolation to an individual or their family who has to wait too long. But the general performance of the National Health Service in Scotland on A&E performance is stronger than in the rest of the United Kingdom. And as I recounted to Parliament on Tuesday, waits of 8 and 12 hours are falling at accident and emergency. Now, I want to make sure that people get treatment as quickly as they need to. 1 million people in Scotland go in and out of A&E within 4 hours every year in Scotland. We have to make sure that performance is strengthened, and the Government is absolutely focused on doing exactly that.
Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. Scots are trapped in almost £2 billion of council tax debt, locked into poverty and living in fear of bailiffs at the door. Some of the families trapped in this situation spoke to Aberlour, and this is what they said. I felt like I was stuck in a hole, and I was getting deeper into it, and I wasn't going to be able to get out of it. You worry about being seen as a bad parent, or you worry and are upset that your kids are missing out on things like treats and stuff like that. There are thousands of families across Scotland trapped in this situation. The rules for council tax debt here are 4 times as harsh as they are in England. This is trapping families with unpayable debts, in some cases for decades. The Scottish Greens have a plan to end this scandal, bringing our debt collection rules into line with the rest of the UK by changing the housing bill. Will the First Minister support our plan to end this cruel regime and break the cycle of poverty that so many families are stuck in?
First Minister.
So before I answer Mr Greer's question, can I express my congratulations to Ross Greer and to Gillian Mackay on their election as co-leaders of the Scottish Green Party. My admiration also to Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater for their service, and look forward, as I do with all party leaders, to cooperate on the issues that require our cooperation in a parliament where no one party has a majority at the present moment. In relation to the substance of Mr Greer's point, I acknowledge that financial distress can be a significant source of difficulty for families, and that it can increase the challenge that they face. That is why the Government's agenda is absolutely focused on eradicating child poverty. That is my key priority at the heart of the Government's agenda, and the support that we put in place is designed to do that. So some of the measures that we have in place, such as the Scottish Child Payment, which doesn't exist in England and Wales, is a significant measure that supports families in difficulty. And we have, of course, on other occasions, taken steps to remove debt in council tax. So I'm very happy to engage in discussion with, I know Ms McCallan, the Housing Secretary, will engage in discussion with Mr Greer on the proposals that he wishes to bring forward for the Housing Bill, which is coming to Parliament for consideration.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. Can I thank the First Minister for his answer and his kind words? Energy bills are sky high. The weekly shop costs double what it used to. A meal deal can be £5 now, a jar of coffee can be £7.50. And 1 in 5 households are living payslip to payslip. They're terrified of how they'd pay the bills if something goes wrong. But not everyone is having a hard time. The richest 2% of people now have more wealth than half the population combined. Billionaires should never be getting tax breaks, but they are. Some of Scotland's richest people pay no business rates for their shooting estates. We're missing out on millions of pounds for our schools, libraries and health centres. It's absolutely indefensible that some of the richest people on the planet get a 100% tax break from the Scottish Government. The Scottish Greens have a plan to end that injustice. So can I ask the First Minister, does he really think that billionaire-owned shooting estates need a tax break? Should aristocrats get blank cheques while the poorest have bailiffs at their door?
First Minister.
I think obviously the issues that Mr Greer raises are issues that relate to the budget process, and the Government's got a budget process to go through, so we'll happily engage with him on those issues, as we will with all parties. On his point about family costs and household costs, I totally agree with him about the burden of energy costs, and I don't think the situation has been helped by the failure of the Labour Government at Westminster to deliver on the promises that were made to people. People were promised there'd be a reduction in their energy bills of £300, and energy bills are higher now than they were when the Labour Government came to power. So my simple response to Mr Greer and to Parliament and to the people of Scotland is this: if you want to work out what a Labour Government looks like, look at the shambles that's at Westminster today.
Question number 4, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to reduce the number of road traffic incidents on the trunk road network in light of reports of a number of serious accidents over the summer.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I would like to express my sympathies to anyone affected by the loss of a loved one or who has been injured on our roads. The Scottish Government is investing a record £48 million in road safety in this financial year, including just over £12 million on trunk road safety engineering. Transport Scotland regularly liaises with Police Scotland on road safety issues and undertakes an annual assessment of the safety performance of the trunk road network. Mitigation measures are then prioritised for delivery. This robust approach ensures that the funding targets specific locations with a direct focus to improve safety and to save lives.
Tweed.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. Recently, there have been 5 serious road traffic accidents on the A84 at Blair Drummond in my constituency. To ask the First Minister what action is being taken on the 2019 Transport Scotland review of the area and whether the Cabinet Secretary for Transport will meet with me and concerned community members to discuss. First Minister.
I very much understand the concerns that have been raised by Evelyn Tweed in relation to this junction. I understand there is an ongoing police investigation into recent collisions in the area, and that will of course be subject to review by Transport Scotland. I'll be very happy for Ministers to meet with Evelyn Tweed and her constituents to discuss this issue. It's important that we are responsive to the challenges that are faced on the road network, and Transport Scotland looks carefully, as does the Transport Ministers, to all of these incidents to identify where we can take action to improve road safety. I'm happy for those arrangements to be put in place.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Too many people are dying on accidents on the A75. Will the First Minister therefore add his voice of support to the campaign launched by Finlay Carson and myself to save lives by expediting the dualling of the A75?
First Minister.
Well, the Government has taken a number of measures to improve road safety on the A75 and to improve the road. There are obviously ongoing discussions in relation to the upgrade of the road, and the Government will play its full part in all of those discussions.
Question number 5, Tess White.
Ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on the steps that the Scottish Government is taking as a result of the Supreme Court judgment in 4 Women Scotland Limited versus the Scottish Ministers.
First Minister.
The Government has made clear since the Supreme Court ruling that we accept the judgment and that we are taking forward detailed work that is necessary as a consequence. A working group convened by the Permanent Secretary is actively considering the implications of the judgment across every key area of government. As a result of this work, action has already been taken, including updated guidance for the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act 2018 and amendments to the public appointments recruitment process for regulated public bodies through which the Act is applied. Through joint working with Police Scotland, we will publicly consult on the Stop and Search Code of Practice before the end of this year. So action has been taken. We also continue to engage with the Equality and Human Rights Commission while we await their awaited Code of Practice, which I understand is yet to be submitted to the United Kingdom Government.
Tess White.
What the First Minister has said is a huge insult to women and the women who are protesting outside today. And, First Minister, we're not buttoned up the back. It's been months since the Supreme Court judgment and the Court of Session decision on single-sex toilets in schools. Children have gone back to school now, and teachers, some of whom are here today in the gallery, are still being told to follow the SNP government's unlawful support for transgender pupils in schools guidance, fearful for their jobs if they don't. Edinburgh City Council has acted now because delaying would be illegal. This SNP government is showing willful ignorance. Why is the First Minister deliberately ignoring the rule of law?
First Minister. I will address any points of order after we have finished First Minister's questions, Ms Graham. Thank you.
The Government is undertaking the work that I set out in my earlier answer to Tess White. On the issue of schools guidance, we are committed to ensuring that the supporting transgender young people in schools guidance is fit for purpose. And as with any significant legal or policy developments, we are considering whether the guidance, what developments are required in the guidance to ensure that all aspects of that analysis are taken forward. So there is complex work underway in this respect, and the Government is doing that work.
Ash Regan.
Presiding Officer, the Supreme Court has been absolutely clear. Sex in law means biological sex, and single-sex provisions must be respected. The EHRC told the Government not to wait before acting, and yet we still see confusion across all our public bodies, from schools to prisons to the NHS and local authorities. Can the First Minister explain, if government lawyers are not there to advise ministers to follow the law, what exactly are they there for? And will he now commit to ensuring that all publicly funded bodies comply with the judgment in full and without delay?
First Minister.
As I have explained in my answers and as has been explained by other ministers, the Government is undertaking the careful, detailed legal work that is required to put in place the provisions that are required by the Supreme Court case. And we have taken some of the actions that we are able to take to date, and we will continue to pursue the other issues as we take forward that work. And government lawyers support the Government in its work to make sure the Government at all times is acting within the law.
Question number 6, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the First Minister, in light of SEPA's warning of water scarcity over the summer and the introduction of restrictions on water abstraction last week in some areas, including North Fife, what action the Scottish Government is taking to secure water supply in Scotland in the face of a change in climate conditions?
First Minister.
It is clear that climate change is driving more extreme weather, and this summer has seen very dry conditions across Scotland, particularly in the east. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency have confirmed today that the number of areas at significant water scarcity has now increased to 10. We are implementing Scotland's National Water Scarcity Plan with SEPA and Scottish Water to support those affected. I recognise the seriousness of the situation, particularly for producers. SEPA are working closely with affected water abstractors, principally the National Farmers Union for Scotland, the Scotch Whisky Association and others, to minimise the impact where possible. Our investment in resilience measures over many years means that Scottish Water is able to maintain supplies during prolonged dry periods to all parts of Scotland. However, supplies are clearly not infinite, and so I would encourage everyone to use water responsibly.
Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, over last week, along with other MSPs in here for the East of Scotland, including yourself, we met online with Scottish Water and heard about the work that they are doing, including trying to get people to reduce water usage, which I support. I've also been in touch with SEPA over these last few months, and I would want to thank the staff in both Scottish Water and SEPA for the work that they have done to try and manage this situation. But moving forward, looking to the medium term and the longer term, does the First Minister agree and recognise that there is a need to review water infrastructure and water resilience? For farmers, this has been a difficult year, with the prediction that food production will be well down this year as a result of the dry spells. The NFU Scotland say building resilience must be a shared priority between growers and regulators and policymakers. So will the First Minister agree to have a look at the medium term and what we need to be doing to put in more water storage to support farmers and others drawing water, and to look at reservoirs and whether we need to increase the capacity across Scotland in the medium and longer term? First Minister.
Not for the first time, Mr Rowley raises very significant answers and provides an indication of some of where the solutions lie on these questions. So I very much welcome the contents of his question and express the willingness of ministers to engage with him on these points. The situation has been acute. I started receiving a weekly water scarcity warning from SEPA in April of this year. Normally, I would begin to receive those warnings probably about August. So that's an indication practically of the effects of climate change. And Mr Rowley will be familiar with the Government's priority on tackling climate change, because that is part of the solution. What is also part of the solution is the constant improvement to water infrastructure around the country, and a significant upgrade has just been completed in my own constituency in the city of Perth to deal with exactly the issues that Mr Rowley raises. And these developments are going on around the country. Now, they often cause some disruption to members of the public as well, so we have to wrestle with that too. But the last point that Mr Rowley raises is an important issue about water resilience and what more needs to be done to secure that, and that obviously has an effect on capital priorities. But the Government would be happy to engage with Mr Rowley and other interested members on these questions, and it's very much on the agenda of the Minister for Energy and Climate Change.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week, 6,000 people in Berwickshire were left without water, and that included vulnerable people and farmers with livestock. And whilst I welcome Scottish Water's commitment to a full investigation of this, can the First Minister confirm if Scottish Water will provide full compensation to all affected customers, and can he outline what action is being taken to ensure that the residents of the borders are not left with access to water again?
First Minister.
Well, I understand the inconvenience for members of the public, and occasionally there will be interruptions to water supply. This happens very infrequently, where there are issues that affect individual water systems around the country. I know that Scottish Water worked very quickly to restore supplies, and they also provided water to those affected households to ensure that they were able to receive adequate supply over the course of that period. So I understand the inconvenience, but I do recognise that Scottish Water work very hard to make sure that resilience is offered where there is an interruption to supply.
Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, even in a country that's synonymous with rain, the effects of climate change will make it necessary to be prudent about how much water we use, when, why we use it. Can I ask, therefore, what the Scottish Government and its agencies can do to publicise and promote everyday tips to all of us to conserve water and ensure that we are all using Scotland's water sensibly?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, these are all steps that what Mr Kidd talks about is important, and these are all steps that are part of the Water is Always Worth Saving campaigns that are taken forward by Scottish Water and SEPA, because although we have had a history of an abundance of water supply, what this summer demonstrates is that can be challenged by climate change. One example of extremely good work here, which I've experienced in my own constituency, was in the village of Dunkelvin-Burnham, where, with a collaboration with Scottish Water, the village was able to reduce its water use in a year by 1 million litres. Now, that's a small village in Perthshire that was able to, by community engagement and awareness and simple things about the use of water, to reduce water consumption. And that, I think, is part of addressing the mix of interventions that are required to address the point that Mr Rowley put to me, which Mr Kidd has reinforced. So I would encourage more awareness of these campaigns, and I'll reflect with ministers on what more needs to be done to increase that awareness.
Willie Rennie.
When I've spoken before about water in the River Eden catchment, I've talked about flooding and the dramatic impact on the people in Cooper. Now it's about the dramatic impact on farmers with broccoli, potatoes and even cereal crops that have been dramatically impacted. I've argued before for a river catchment plan for the River Eden, because we need to get everybody together to deal with these extremes of climate change. Will the First Minister agree to such a catchment plan?
First Minister.
I think it's not just required for the River Eden. I think what the current environment tells us is that we need to have such river management plans in place across the board. And Mr Rennie's absolutely right that that can only happen if everybody is round the table to make it happen. I've seen developments of that in my own constituency which have been successful, but it required every party to be round the table to make that possible. Mr Rennie highlights, as did Mr Rowley, the significant impact on the agricultural harvest this year. Malting barley is not of the strength that we would want to see. Some of the vegetable crops have not flourished to the extent that we would want because of the absence both of rainfall and the ability to abstract water. So I'll take away from First Minister's questions the importance of the river management catchment areas and ask ministers to engage with Mr Rennie and with other interested members on how that could be taken forward at local level in Scotland.
Thank you. Move to general and constituency supplementaries, and I call Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent sadly lost her niece to methanol poisoning a few years ago, and since this time the family have campaigned to get the dangers of methanol included as a mandatory part of the PSHE in England. Will the First Minister join me in reiterating the dangers of methanol poisoning and confirm whether the Cabinet Secretary for Education will meet with me to discuss what more can be done to raise awareness in Scottish schools?
First Minister.
First of all, President, let me express my sympathy to the member's family. I'm very sorry to hear to the constituents' family of Marie McNair. I'm very concerned and sorry to hear of the example that has been set out about the impact of methanol poisoning. It is important that we have a comprehensive set of interventions to address all of these issues of potential harm, and I'm very happy to agree that the Education Secretary would meet with Marie McNair to discuss our approach to education in respect of alcohol, medicines, drugs, tobacco and solvents as part of the wider curricular approach we take in Scottish schools.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There are around 150 homeowners in Aberdeen's Balnagask area potentially losing tens of thousands of pounds due to RAC, plunging them into debt and mental health crises. Now, I notified this government I'd found £20 million to fix this last spring, but the Cabinet Secretary still hasn't decided whether to release the funds. So will the First Minister instruct his Cabinet Secretary to urgently repurpose the £20 million? And if she will not, to use a fraction of the billions promised for housing this week to give the Tory RAC owners a fair settlement?
First Minister.
I recognise the importance of the issue that Liam Kerr raises and the worry it will be causing to his constituents. The Cabinet Secretary is actively engaged in considering the proposals that have been put to her and will come to conclusions very shortly, and Mr Kerr and his constituents will be advised when that conclusion has been reached.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Legal advice published this week concluded that the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill would not be compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, and I quote, because without justification it contains no adequate safeguard protecting the position of those with disabilities where suicidal ideation is more likely, and who are, because of that feature of their disability, more likely to express a wish to die. In particular, indicating this would breach Article 14, which prohibits discrimination. So can I ask the First Minister whether he agrees with me that this presents an unsurmountable risk to disabled people's equality and human rights in Scotland if the Assisted Dying Bill were to pass?
First Minister.
President Officer, first of all, let me say that the Government takes a neutral stance on the Assisted Dying Bill, which is before Parliament just now. It's a member's bill, it's not a government bill, and the Government takes a neutral stance. So I can only express a personal opinion to Pam Duncan-Glancy. As Ms Duncan-Glancy will know, I do not support the Assisted Dying Bill, and I don't support it for many of the reasons that she has just put on the record. So I have enormous personal sympathy with the point that she raises. These are issues that Parliament will have to wrestle with as it considers the legislation, but I can only express to her my agreement with the point that she's made.
Ms Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister set out what the implications are for the Scottish budget of the UK budget being delayed until the 26th of November?
First Minister.
I think this is a very unfortunate situation, to put it mildly. The lateness of the presentation of the UK budget will mean that the budget process of the Scottish Government will be under enormous pressure, given that Parliament will rise for the election sometime in around about the middle of March. So the window for scrutiny and for delivery of the budget priorities, and particularly for the Government to fulfil its legal obligations in relation to the scrutiny by the Scottish Fiscal Commission, for example, will be in a very constrained timescale. We have to leave enough time for both parliamentary scrutiny of the budget and scrutiny of the Government's choices by the Scottish Fiscal Commission. But the lateness of the presentation of the UK budget means there are quite literally a very short number of weeks available in which that can be done before the start of the financial year in April of 2026. So it is a completely undesirable situation. The Finance Secretary has written, I think, to the Finance and Public Administration Committee, and will discuss these issues with the Scottish Fiscal Commission. But it is an entirely undesirable situation that the Scottish Parliament has been left in, and the Scottish Government has been left in, as a consequence of the delay to the timetable for the United Kingdom budget.
Sandesh Gulhani.
The SNP open-door policy to asylum is a sham, when even Susan Aitken, the SNP leader of Glasgow Council, says the number of asylum seekers is unsustainable. Peter Smith's ITV report highlights the farce of illegal migrants being prioritised for housing over legal migrants and Scots. Is it time the First Minister was honest with the people and admits that illegal immigration is crippling services in Glasgow?
First Minister.
I've set out my concern about where the debate about migration is going, and I honestly don't think that the contribution of Sandesh Gulhani helps us one bit to try to make sure our country remains cohesive and united, as it has always been on these questions. Now, the issues that are faced in the City of Glasgow are fundamentally faced, and Councillor Aitken has made this point clear, because of the inadequacy of the approach of the United Kingdom Home Office. Now, that's where there needs to be a realisation of the implications of these issues, and I encourage the Home Office to engage with Glasgow City Council on these particular questions. So I want to make it absolutely clear to anyone that's listening that I think Scotland is a welcoming country. Under my leadership, it will remain a welcoming country, and that should be something that we are proud of as a country.
Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, hundreds of Scottish soul tyres have been put up in my constituency, predominantly but not exclusively in the Marehill area. The soul tyre is inclusive, welcoming and tolerant. However, serious concerns have been raised by many of my constituents that there may be an attempt by the far right to hijack our country's flag. Racist graffiti is starting to appear in my local areas, including Sink the Boats. One of my constituents was told the other day, get back on their boat. Many in Marehill, from all backgrounds, have reached out to me with huge concern in offering their love, their support and their solidarity for all those, including immigrants and asylum seekers, who have made their life in Marehill. Will the First Minister show his solidarity with the people of Marehill, the vast majority of whom are indeed welcoming, tolerant and inclusive? And what practical support can the Scottish Government offer our communities?
First Minister.
Preserves, I could not have expressed that better than Mr Doris has expressed that point, and I agree with him that the national flag of Scotland has always been represented as an inclusive flag, which is there to draw all of us together in Scotland as an essential part of our national identity, and I would always want to make sure that was the case. I had the pleasure of being in Mr Doris's constituency last Thursday at the launch of a magnificent partnership between Homestart, Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board and the Glasgow City Council, which is supporting many vulnerable families in the Marehill area, and I was glad that Mr Doris made it possible for me to be there. And at the heart of that event was the spirit of inclusion, the welcome to people from other places who had made Glasgow their home, who had made Marehill their home, and who were proud of that fact. So I think what the Government will do is the Government will give the leadership and the practical support to community cohesion that we offer, because we believe, as Mr Doris does, that Scotland is best served by being an inclusive, welcoming country. It has been in the past and it must be in the future.
Pauline McNeill.
The Homeless Project Scotland in Glasgow has done an incredible job feeding people, giving them a bed for the night, saving their lives. In fact, 27,000 people through the door. But they themselves may be homeless if the Planning Committee at Glasgow City Council don't consent, allowing them to remain in Glassford Street. if it was to close, it will be devastating for many homeless people. Does the First Minister agree that Glasgow City Council must work with the Homeless Project to find an alternative home should this planning consent not be granted? And would the First Minister consider permitting, time permitting, to visit the project, which I think he has known about for some time, and I think that you would be very welcome if you did.
First Minister.
If Parliament Neil will forgive me, I won't intrude on the planning application process. It's generally pretty tricky when ministers do that. But the project carries out an important role in supporting very vulnerable individuals in our country. So regardless of the planning application, we've got to find ways of supporting individuals. And I know the Housing Secretary is planning to engage on this issue and perhaps to visit. I'll obviously give consideration to that because I want to make sure that we have in place the practical support for people that are homeless. The statement that the Housing Secretary gave to Parliament on Tuesday, I hope gave Parliament an indication of the sense of priority that we attach to improving housing supply. There's a lot of improvements to housing supply have been achieved in the last 12 months, and I'm determined to build on that in the period ahead.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. I call Christine Graham for a point of order.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Parliament's corporate body issued guidance that those attending in the public gallery should desist from wearing visible slogans. Does that direction apply to MSPs in the Chamber? Especially significant, I think, no matter what that slogan says, as we enter election periods.
Thank you, Ms Graham, for that point of order. It's not a matter that is covered in our standing orders, and there is nothing in the guidance in the code. But as ever, I would ask all members, as they do, to present themselves in the chamber dressed in a respectful manner as a consequence of the role we hold. Thank you very much. There will be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so before we move to members' business in the name of Bob Doris.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We're committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.